Part 2 of the lesson is going to use some of the rules that we used yesterday with negative exponents, and then also this concept, the property of multiplication with exponents. And so let's take a look at the first problem. Here we've got some x's and we have y's as bases. So we're just going to collect the same bases together. So we count up how many x's we have. Here we have 3 x's, and here we have 5 x's. And we move on to the next base. The next base is y, and so it's y to the 4th plus negative 6. And then we just add them up. And so here we have 3 x's and 5 x's make a total of 8 x's. But here when we add this up, we're going to end up subtracting because they're opposite in sign. So we have 4 y's and negative 6 y's make negative 2 y's. Well, that's what we did. We used those properties that we learned today, but we have to use the properties that we learned yesterday at this stage. And so treat this as a fraction, and the way we get rid of these negative exponents is we take the reciprocal. We move it to the other spot in the fraction. And so when we do that, we have our answer, x to the 8th over y to the 2nd power. And that is our answer. Well, and the next problem is going to involve a few extra steps because we have some coefficients. Here we have negative 2. We've got 3 and 4 all together. And so we're going to just bring those coefficients together. Negative 2, 3, and 4. Then we count up how many x's we have. And so I see that we have negative 3 and 4. So we just write those down. X to the negative 3rd plus 4. So you're just counting up the terms of the same base. Then we move on to the y's. Here we have 4 y's and negative 5 y's. So we have y to the 4th plus negative 5. And so now we're ready to do the work. And the work is to count up how many x's and y's we have and multiply these coefficients. So we take negative 2 and 4, make negative 6 times by 4 makes negative 24. And then we count up the x's. Here we have negative 3 plus 4. We have to subtract those two numbers, and that's how we get 1. Here we have to subtract as well, and we get this time a negative 1 because we had more negatives than positives. So we're not done yet. We still need to simplify this. That means getting rid of negative exponents. So again, the common mistake people are going to want to make is moving this negative 24 to the bottom and calling it positive 24. No, that's not what you do. With negative numbers, they stay where they're at. They're just negative numbers. It's just negative exponents that we're going to move. So we take that y to the negative 1st power and we switch its location in the fraction. And when we do that, we still have that negative 24 on top. That doesn't move. X to the 1st stays on top as well. And you could put a 1 there if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. And this y to the negative 1st, that goes down to the bottom. So I'll just show that exponent there as y to the 1st, showing you how that negative sign disappears when you switch its location in the fraction. And there is our answer. Well, another chance to practice that concept here. We have a 3 and a negative 5. Those are the two coefficients. So we write those next to each other, 3 times negative 5, and then count up the exponents on the common bases. So x is the only variable that has some exponents, so we count them up, 2, 6, and 1. If you don't see an exponent on a number, it's just 1. So we go ahead and do that multiplication. We end up with a negative 15, and then count up the exponents on the x's. So you got 2. And 6 make 8, plus 1 makes 9. So negative 15x to the 9th power. Well, 2 more problems here. And so on this problem, we're going to do the same sort of thing. The difference here on these 2 problems was that notice that we had different notation. Here we had some parentheses. Here we had the dot. They mean the same thing. The parentheses, just right next to each other, represents multiplication. The dot does as well. And so here we're using a different notation, the parentheses again. And we take those coefficients and bring them together. So what property are we using when we're bringing terms together like we did on letter B here and letter A? Well, we're using that commutative. commutative property allows us, and then this is of multiplication, allows us to move terms. Now notice the word commutative. They came up with this term because commute means to move. And so we're moving from one spot to the next. So we're using that property to move these terms. And so that's how we can do this. -5 times by 6 times by -3 times by -2. You're bringing all those coefficients next to each other and multiplying them. And then you're bringing the next term, in which is x. So we bring those numbers next to each other. So we have times by x to the second plus -4. So since they're being multiplied, we add up the exponents. That's the rule. And so with the same thing with the y's. Oh, we only have one y. Oh, we had one more x here. I missed that one. So let's go ahead and add on that extra x to the first power. So we had 2, -4, and 1. And then we just have one y term here, and so we can just write down y to the 5th power. And so from there we can go ahead and multiply out these numbers. Now when I do that, I'm going to do 5 times -2, which makes a positive 10. Then multiply out the 6 and -3 makes -18. So when I multiply those two, you see 10 times a number makes it go quick. 18 and then add a 0, so 180. And it's negative because we have one negative sign. And so from that point, count up these exponents on the x's, and that makes a x to the -1st power. Then we count up the y's here. We have y to the 5th, and there is our answer. Well, we can just simplify it a little bit further by getting rid of those negative exponents. And so the way we're going to do that is treat this as a fraction, and then take that -1, and we're going to take its reciprocal. It's just going to go in the bottom of the fraction there. And so we can rewrite this as -180, and then y to the 5th power all over x. And there is our answer, -180, y to the 5th over x. Well, one more problem to try, and here we have the same scenario again. Looks pretty much like the same problem, just different numbers. -3, 4, 2, and -6. We're bringing all those coefficients next to each other. And we're using that commutative property to allow us to do that. And then we take all the x's. So the x's are these numbers here, x to the 3rd, x to the -4th. So there's only 2 this time. We write those next to each other. But since I'm going to use that property, I'll just write the same base and just add up those exponents. Do the same thing with the y's. So we count up the y's here. We have 8 y's. We've got -7 y's. We just count them up. Y to the 8th plus -7. And we count that stuff up. And so we go ahead and multiply first. Here I'll multiply these two numbers. That makes -12. This makes also a -12. And I remember my 12s. I get 144 when I multiply two 12s together, and it's positive because of the two negatives. Well, we count up the x's. We have x to the -1st power, and we have a y to the 1st power because we had to subtract because they're opposite in sign. So one more step here, and that is to get rid of those negative exponents. Notice that numbers, exponents that are positive don't move. Numbers that are positive or negative, they didn't move. It's only the negative exponents that we're going to take the reciprocal of. So this x to the -1st, this goes down below, and we rewrite the problem in a simplified form. 144y over, and this becomes just an x on the bottom. Now, before I wrote y to the 1st when I moved it down, you could do that. So I could write x to the 1st if I wanted to, but it's not necessary. So I'll just leave the answer just like that. 144y over x. Good luck on tonight's homework.